Hello and welcome back to WJ Live Junior, where we have been hosting with 20-something-year-old hosts for about a week now. Unfortunately, this will be the last WJ Live Junior we see in a little while. Some of the older folks are going to be coming out of the basement tomorrow to appear again on the show. We're letting them out. We're unlocking them. We've had them pretty much imprisoned down there under the studio, just trying to give ourselves an extra minute in the sun here.
Just having some fun.
Everything has to come to an end. So in honor of that last moment for WJ Live Junior, we're going to start out today. I'm Andrew J. Shashaw, reporter with the Western Journal, and I'm joined by Michael Austin on my left, another reporter with the Western Journal. On my right, we have editor Deborah Van Kempen. And today we've got a packed show for you guys. We're going to be talking about the immigration crisis, the concentration camps that Joe Biden is running on the U.S. southern border.
Oh, my
Let me tell
Lord.
you. We're going to be talking about special CPAC coverage from the Western Journal, but we're going to start out today with a train derailment or explosion. Deborah, can you get us kicked off with that?
Yeah, very exciting event to start off the show. So just this week, actually just on Tuesday, we saw reports that a train that was carrying oil collided with an 18-wheeler semi-truck and exploded. And the explosion was huge, and it was like ridiculously hot, and there were all these people that had video footage and everything. And so it's this is kind of, it goes back to the issue that we saw with Biden revoking the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline, which is the pipeline that was carrying oil from Canada to the U.S. And so a lot of workers, when this story first happened that Biden revoked the permit, they were very angry, and rightfully so, because this decision, this executive order, effectively killed about 11,000 jobs, and 8,000 of those were union jobs, I believe. And so it was just a very sad time for a lot of those people. And so one of the issues that they raised when they were talking to reporters about this is that canceling the pipeline is only going to pave the way for more unsafe methods of oil transportation. And so this is what we've seen here. And we actually have a video of the explosion, if we're able to put that up on the screen.
Back up. Holy oh my god.
Dude, that's gotta be a train.
Wow, we felt that in the car.
So that explosion is just massive, and you can see that they are actually afraid, and they're backing up their car. And so, when Biden revoked the permit for the Keystone Pipeline, his whole basis for doing so is because he wanted a better climate, and he wanted to, one of the premises of his campaign, one of the promises was that he was going to create 10 million clean energy jobs. And he has not really given a specific date when he's going to create these jobs, or even what these jobs are going to look like. And so it really, this incident in particular, just kind of goes back to the question of, well, if we're having trains exploding that are carrying oil, is that not worse for the climate than putting oil through the pipeline? And so I just wanted to kind of open it up for discussion. Do we think that this incident is going to kind of raise some eyebrows in the Biden administration?
Of course it's not. We talk on the campaign trail all the time, and we hear constantly from the left-wing establishment that, this is going to be the better way, to get away from oil, or at the very least to move away from dangerous pipelines, which leak all over the place, blah, 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 blah. Unfortunately, none of that's true. We see right here all of that oil that was going to be slowly burned up in people's vehicles and in, different machines over the course of, a year, maybe more, just lit on fire and, emitted into the atmosphere immediately, because it is absolutely unthinkably difficult to move a largely flammable object vast distances in an open system. At least with these pipelines, you have the closed system. It's very reminiscent of, we're going to hear constantly about how dangerous oil is in light of the BP oil spill. We heard the same thing. Unfortunately, with those attacks, nobody seems to realize that they are attacking the safest means and the most efficient means that we have thus far. It's not as though a bunch of evil, like oil barons have just woken up one morning and decided, how can we move our product in the most dangerous and inefficient way possible for the environment? Instead, we see it being done in the best way possible and attacked by the left, and they're just pushing things into the worst possible avenues imaginable. And we see the effects here, but unfortunately, I don't think that this is going to wake up the left to those realities at all.
Yeah, fossil fuels and oil and coal and all that stuff. It's not only, the most efficient, but it's really outside of nuclear, which the left has also put out their fear-mongering campaign about. Outside of that, it's really our only option because it's the only thing that has enough power to really sustain this whole country. With clean energy, we don't even have large enough batteries for clean energy to store that much energy for us to use later. So this is really our only option. And that's the one thing Biden didn't realize when he's closing down. When you close down that pipeline, we still need all that.
Yeah.
And so now we're just going to be moving it in different ways, and they're much more dangerous ways.
Right. So you don't think that the administration is going to want to even comment on this issue?
No, they're not.
No, I don't see any sort of major action being taken or any major statements. I think they'll talk about what a calamity it is, and they may even employ it as another excuse for why oil is dangerous and bad, despite the fact that they are pushing it into those avenues. I think that's the problem with the left, is when they envision these perfect world scenarios, they never think about the externalities, and they never think about what has to happen on the way to that perfect world. I don't think there's anyone on the right who believes in a free market and who believes in an efficient United States and a prosperous United States that doesn't think, some of these excellent things that we're seeing, like Tesla, aren't the future. They absolutely are, but we're not there yet. And the government forcing us down that road before we're ready for it is only going to create more dangers. So I think if they were smart, they'll lay off it. But I think that if they're going to bring it up at all, they're only going to dig themselves into a deeper hole.
Yeah, no, they're going to use it as another example of why we need to completely eliminate all fossil fuels, and it's a shame.
Yeah, so kind of the reason why I wanted to ask is because I was watching a few Twitter videos earlier that showed Jen Psaki talking to Fox News reporter Peter Doocy, and she was talking about, he was asking her, so in light of the revoking of the Keystone XL pipeline and in light of you guys laying thousands of workers off, what is your game plan for creating these 10 million clean energy jobs? And she basically told him, I would love to see you bring some data to the table about that. And it's like, well, great, Jen, thank you for that. But, they just don't really seem to have a clear game plan. So do you guys think that there's anything concrete that's going to come out of Biden or Psaki's mouth in the coming months about that?
I mean, I could see them creating those jobs, but they're just going to be, government manufactured jobs that, and the end result will be other jobs will be lost. And so it'll just end in a net result for the American people.
Yeah, no, I mean, we talked during the after 2008, we saw the Obama administration discuss, these shovel-ready jobs that were going to come, stimulus projects, and these different projects that his administration was going to start. Of course, several years later, when those things don't pan out, you see him laughing on camera, saying, "I guess those shovel-ready jobs weren't so shovel-ready." It's not funny. It's incredibly dangerous for the American family and for the working class family. And I don't think that if that's the return to normalcy that we were promised, is just that they're going to get up there and lie nicely, or that they're going to, turn it on Fox News when Fox News asks a legitimate question about the plan. We heard constantly throughout the Trump administration about how, despite them having a fantastic rapid fire plan for vaccinations and for, getting the states on their feet to handle COVID, we heard that they had no plan. We've heard since the beginning of this administration that there was no plan when they came into office. Unfortunately, they forwarded almost nothing new, if they've forwarded anything. And if this is the return to normalcy that the American people have seen, I think very quickly they're going to realize maybe the last administration was absolutely right about, moving away from politics as usual.
Yeah, and it really just, it kind of brings me back to all the workers that have been laid off by this. Doocy asked Psaki, he was like, what are you guys going to do for these workers that you've laid off? Where are the clean energy jobs for them? And really, they have no clean energy jobs for them as it stands. They're just kind of left out to dry.
And you don't want to, we've talked about a couple of days this week or in the last week, not trying to ascribe motive to the left or to your opponents. It's not necessarily the best idea. in this case, I can't see any other mindset on the left other than at the very least, they just don't care about those folks at all.
Yeah.
If you cared, you wouldn't hear Obama making jokes like those shovel-ready jobs weren't so shovel-ready. You wouldn't hear the dismissive, these folks will learn how to make solar panels. It's like, well, how?
Yeah.
Are you going to send them
Right.
to school for it? What are they going to do to make money in between? And of course, all of those solutions would just be bigger government solutions, but they dismiss the average American worker and the American people so outright. And again, that is that's the politics as usual that we're going to see from the Biden administration. That's what we continue to see from the Biden administration.
Yeah. And if those jobs do come up, I imagine, it's going to come at great cost, and they're essentially just going to be government handouts because clean energy isn't going to work for us. It's just, in terms of like the green energies we're seeing right now, it's not going to work for us. So those jobs are just, yeah. Any such plan is just going to be counterproductive.
And I think another fumble that we've seen from Jen Psaki this week is her failure to address or to take seriously questions about kids in cages at the border under this new Biden administration. And so, Michael, I know that's what you wanted to talk about today. So
yes, and so under the Trump administration, we've been told for a long time that America has turned into Nazi Germany, and that Trump and Border Patrol and ICE, they're rounding up these undocumented immigrants and putting them into concentration camps. And when these people say, when these left-wing activists say concentration camps, what they actually mean is border detention facilities, which, believe it or not, are actually quite different than a Holocaust concentration camp in a number of ways. But, all of these activists, all of these left-wing politicians, like AOC was one of the biggest ones, they believed that under a new administration, under a better left-wing administration, those facilities would become a thing of the past. Unfortunately for them, it looks like that's not the case. Joe Biden's administration just opened up a new border detention facility for children in Texas. And, it's basically just a temporary housing place, which is what they all are essentially, that they put these kids in. And this has led a lot of those left-wing activists to cry out and say, wait, I thought we got the Nazis out of the government. Why are we putting kids back in cages again? And, Douglas Golden did such a great job in writing this piece for us at the Western Journal. And I just wanted to pull a few graphs of what he said, because I think it really gets at the crux of what the issue is here. The point isn't whether this constitutes kids in cages. For the most part, what opponents of the Trump administration's immigration policy didn't get or couldn't acknowledge is that kids in cages didn't actually mean kids in cages either. Nor did they get or couldn't acknowledge that the infamous photo showing kids in cages was taken during the Obama administration. The Trump administration merely stopped the catch and release policy whereby illegal immigrant individuals or families were released pending adjudication of their case. However, because of the so-called Flores settlement in the 1990s, children couldn't be held for more than 20 days. There were also cases involving unaccompanied minors, up to a quarter of whom couldn't show up for court hearings if released to relatives or sponsors, according to the Center on Immigration Studies. So the real point of all of this is that this whole kids in cages rhetoric and when the right tried to flip this over on Joe a few months back during the debates, I saw a lot of conservatives even buying into the rhetoric that this is some sort of grossly inhumane treatment of children and of migrants. And really, these are just temporary holding facilities. Mm-hmm. They're fed. They're given all these different things that they need to survive. I think at the children ones, they even offer like classes and things. So all sorts of services provided. And they're just meant to be temporary. It's not a permanent thing. This is not jail. This is not a concentration camp. This is not the Holocaust, which, celebrities like Pedro Pascal have made that comparison. So now that these activists are seeing that, oh, wait, Biden's doing this? Oh, wait, is this not actually a genocide of people? Do you think they're starting to wake up to the fact that they've been wrong all along about this kids in cages rhetoric? Or do you think they're just going to turn on Biden?
it's difficult to say. Like, I remember very well AOC's nice little photo shoot at the detention center where she's facing the parking lot and crying, and her makeup is running and stuff.
A parking lot, right?
Yes, facing a parking lot, not even facing the detention center, which is just ridiculous. But it's just the comparison that they're trying to make between concentration camps and detention facilities is absurd, because one of them is you hold people for a temporary amount of time, like a few months, maybe a few years at most, and you treat them very ethically. You give them classes, you give them sports to participate in. And the other one is you're holding people for a lifetime, you are torturing them, and you're throwing them in gas chambers, which, correct me if I'm wrong, these facilities do not hold gas chambers.
I don't believe any of them actually have gas
Nor
chambers.
are any of these folks worked to death.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, there's so much to unpack with this conversation over just the last 2 to 4 years, let alone the last 2 decades. And we've seen over that last 2 decades that the left absolutely and unquestionably created the crisis at the southern border. This idea that, we were going to grant amnesty, and we weren't necessarily sure how we were going to tighten border restrictions and kind of answer that problem and slow the crawl towards the United States for some of these migrants. Over the years, left-wing policy and left-wing promises on the campaign trail have just made it worse. They have just continued to bring folks to the border.
Well, this facility is the only reason it's being reopened. If it actually used to be open and then it was closed, is because of the surge of illegal immigration because of Biden.
Yeah, and we talked about that last week. The promise on the campaign trail of, we're going to grant amnesty to folks who were here, prior to X date. We are going to essentially rapidly increase our legal immigration programs, and we are going to provide we have seen in this new bill that the Democrats presented last Thursday that there are absolutely no new restrictions being added to the southern border or to the immigration process. And so they've created this crisis. They've milked it for everything that it's worth, with folks like AOC taking those pictures and dropping this rhetoric. Again, Chris points out a fantastic argument that, on top of all of this, all of the pictures that have been used to drum up concern are taken from the Obama administration. And, this is a policy that has it's politics as usual. On a bipartisan basis, these folks have had to figure out how to run facilities that are going to keep these folks, in a place where we know where they are throughout their amnesty process, or at the very least, the process by which they're going to be onboarded for whatever legal processes they then have to be carried through, whether that is, as essentially like asylum seekers, or whether it is simply the immigration avenues that are provided to them. There is absolutely nothing new here. But of course, when Biden does it, it is... it's very nice locations for, generalized holding for a short period of time. When Trump did it, it was concentration camps. And it just goes to the typical dichotomy of any crisis can be used by the left to paint the right as hateful, authoritarian, totalitarian bigots.
And I think when you look at the state of some of these facilities, I think there's an argument to be made that you could give them some more resources, tidy them up a bit, so some of them look, this one that Biden just opened looks completely clean, really great place to just hold kids for like a couple weeks, which is what these are all meant to be. I think we could improve some of the other facilities to match that, but absent of that, they are not concentration camps.
Right.
This is not a genocide. Any other changes you think that we could see at these sorts of facilities to help kind of push back against that rhetoric? Or do you even think that we should even be focusing on that at all?
I mean, I don't think we should. We've seen over the last 4 years that, at the very least, I would agree, most of these facilities are completely livable. We have seen a couple instances of abuse by, our law enforcement individuals who are running these facilities. Those were promptly addressed. We have seen, issues with, temperature in some of these facilities, or with clothing provided. And those are all quick fixes that should not be focused on. What needs to be focused on is the immigration bill that was just presented. And what needs to be focused on is how do you shore up the border and then provide reasonable avenues for the folks who have come here illegally. You can't remove, we've spoken about this before, you can't remove 11 to 22 million folks just straight out of the United States. Those people are going to need to be given some sort of legal protection. I don't believe that's full citizenship. I don't think they should be voting or be, taking the benefits of American society after coming here illegally and not following the proper avenues. But we shouldn't be focused on these border facilities. What we should be focused on is the process and is the immigration crisis that we're now seeing. Because a lot of these kids are coming through absolutely terrible avenues. Their families are putting them through dangerous treks. We have seen smugglers trying to get them in the United States, masquerading as parents.
Yeah, oftentimes it's not their families.
As an in for people who are not their families. So these children are in a terrible situation, many of them being taken advantage of by, opportunists at the border. It's terrible. And so we need a real legislative fix to stop that, because otherwise these kids are going to keep coming and they're going to keep being put in these facilities no matter how good or bad those facilities are.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think that it's easy to look at the thing that's being presented to us as the most horrible thing that's ever happened in the history of America, where we're holding kids in these cages. And it's easy to look at that and say, wow, yeah, all of our funding and all of our resources need to go toward that, when it's like, oh, there's a new immigration bill that we really need to pay attention to right now. And yeah, I agree completely. We should definitely be focused on the legislation more than whether or not this facility looks nice.
And in terms of improving these facilities, if we shore up our border, if we increase, have better border security, we'll need less of these facilities. They'll be easier to take care of. We won't get a huge influx of kids that are just hard to accommodate with all sorts of these things. But, that's enough talking about left-wing policies. Andrew has some big news coming from the right that he would like to share with us.
Yeah, so in response to this, essentially this push into a more progressive America, every year we see the American Conservative Union, I believe, come together for CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. They come together, normally it's in D.C., and they have a large conference with some of the most prominent conservative thinkers, political figures, staffers, etc., to discuss, what the left has been doing, what the right's solutions are, and just kind of to discuss, what is the trend that we're seeing in the conservative movement? Where should the conservative movement be going? What sort of issues does it need to address? What sort of issues does it need to change its rhetoric on? All of those things. This year, we've seen that CPAC is going to be addressed a little bit differently, because last year there was a bit of a kind of COVID panic at the end of the program, and at the end of the conference. A couple of folks did get COVID, and there was some drama on that. So we've seen the conference get moved to Orlando, Florida this year. Luckily enough, the Western Journal, we're powered by the Western Journal here on WJ Live, and they have been so gracious as to they're sending myself, Deputy Managing Editor of Story, Joe Setyen, Deborah's boss, who has been on the show numerous times, and Russell Spacey, one of our video guys, down to CPAC to essentially see what these figures are talking about, maybe get their ear and kind of see what they're trying to address, see what they want to tell our audience, get some interviews. We have been lucky enough to nail down a couple of interviews, and so just kind of to plug that coverage, it looks like we're going to be speaking with Shelley Luther from Salon Alameda in Texas, who was imprisoned last year, if you'll remember, for keeping her business open through the COVID lockdowns. We have been trying to reach out to some other business owners who will be there for similar reasons. We've spoken to Maj Toure, who we've covered here at the Western Journal a handful of times for Black Guns Matter. We are speaking to a variety of different legislators we've gotten in contact with and are trying to nail down times right now with Congressman Burgess Owens, freshman Congressman Madison Cawthorn, Senator Josh Hawley, and a couple of other folks and experts. We're still figuring out the exact days for that and the exact times for those interviews, but everyone who is interested in getting coverage of what's going on, what's down to the minute at the largest conservative political action event in every year. If they want to keep up with that, they can follow at Joe Setyen, that's JoeSetyon on Twitter, or they can follow myself, Andrew J. Shasha, on Twitter as well. We're going to be providing up-to-the-minute updates on different speakers, on those interviews, dropping videos and different stories. For those stories, you're going to want to check right back here at thewesternjournal.com. We'll talk a little bit more about all of that in just a minute. But it seems like on top of the year's events, which today they're going to, or not today, this year, I guess, message for the event is America Uncanceled. They want to go through cancel culture. They want to talk about the Bill of Rights is kind of stationing out a bunch of the different addresses that are being given. Folks are going to speak about the First Amendment, about big tech tyranny. We're going to hear talks on the lockdowns, on last year's Black Lives Matter riots, and different things that the conservative movement is just starting to dip its toe in with, criminal justice reform, all of those items. But we have also heard that for the first address that he has given since his presidency, former President Donald Trump, is going to be speaking as the keynote speaker on Sunday afternoon. And it seems like, from what we're hearing, not only is that speech confirmed, but our own Cameron Arkind, who is one of our young writers here, just starting to blossom here at the Western Journal.
Yes.
He has started to cover that, and he has said, according to Axios, a report from Monday, that Trump is planning to brand himself as the, quote, presumptive 2024 nominee during his speech at CPAC. It's essentially looking like, from a couple of Trump allies who have spoken to Axios off the record, or I guess on the record, but anonymously, that he is going to present himself as the presumptive 2024 nominee for the Republican Party. It looks like he is going to be running for president once again, or at least really trying to control the strings and show that he has what they called a vice grip on the party's base. And so what I wanted to get at, Michael first, and then Deborah, if you'd want to weigh in as well, I just want to kind of get at whether or not we think that that is good. Every year at CPAC, we hear from folks who are believed to be candidates or who are already candidates in the next election cycle. But I guess I want to get you guys' take on, is it necessarily a good thing to have a former president who is still incredibly prominent and still incredibly popular with the base, getting out there on stage and just outright, overtly saying that he's the guy that the party is going to run with next time around? Is this good? Is this dangerous? Is this bad for the infighting that we've seen in the Republican Party already? What's going on?
I don't know that I'd say it's dangerous, but I certainly don't like it. I don't think it's good. I think after a big loss like we had in 2020, the party needs a little bit of time to breathe, to refocus, to restructure. If he starts going on with all of this stuff, we're going to get set in our ways, and we're going to try. We could very well have a repeat of 2020 next time around. We need more time to explore who we are as a party going forward. And we've talked, after the election results several weeks ago, we talked a lot about what that's going to mean going forward and how we need to take a lot of the things that Trump brought to the party, but we also need to grow in a lot of ways that he was weak in. And if he goes with this, we're going to be stuck in a rut for another 4 years.
Yeah, I think I would have to say I agree. It's, when we were talking about the possibility of Trump running for president, like even a month ago or a few weeks ago, I was like, no, there's no way that he's going to run again after this year. And I mean, it seems like he's planning on doing so. And I agree. I think that the party just really needs to be able to move on to someone who is, in Joe Biden's own words, going to be a unifier of the party, and somebody who is actually going to take those steps instead of just saying it. And so I think that, while Trump did a lot of great things in his presidency, and while he was a fantastic leader in a lot of ways, I do think that it is time for him to sort of open the pathway for another leader to step into that position.
Yeah, I think that for the longest time, the Republican Party had as long as I've been growing up, at least, the Republican Party has had the benefit of never being a cult of personality. They were always, it was always an ideas party. It was good ideas, maybe not messaged the best, but good ideas. And that was what it was about, was talking about the important things that were, affecting the American family and American prosperity and American influence abroad and domestically, and just kind of picking those things apart and picking good candidates to talk about those ideas. I think you cannot understate how fantastic President Donald Trump was. I think he has accomplished more than any president in the last 20 years can say they accomplished. He did a lot of great things, but at the very least, I think, I agree with you, Michael. You have to let the party breathe. You have to at least give it until the primary conversation starts to heat up. And if he wants to throw his hat in the ring again, I'm all for it. Do what you want to do. I don't know if I would support that, but throw your hat in the ring and let those ideas and those messages fight it out. Don't come out, a month into this new administration, go to the most prominent conservative event and say, this is still mine. I just don't necessarily think that that's the best idea. I don't want to take away, however, from the conversation of ideas that is going to be happening this weekend. We listed a lot of different things that they're going to be talking about. They're going to be talking about a heck of a lot more. I know we didn't mention election integrity is going to be discussed. Race relations are going to be discussed. Anti-socialist messaging is going to be discussed. So Deborah, if you were, one of the planners, if you were going to be hosting a talk, I mean, what is the most important thing for conservatives to be discussing right now and getting their stuff together on?
Yeah, well, I think the most important fallacy that they have to address is the issue of systemic racism, that we have seen that kind of terminology popping up over the last year. And I think that was what really drove, obviously the riots over the summer and what was kind of the most prevalent during COVID. And I think that they just really need to get a handle on the truth behind how America is actually, and behind what we can do to be better. Recognizing that there are issues of racism in America, but recognizing where the line can be drawn and where we need to actually implement real life principles instead of just labeling every white person as an oppressor.
Well, this is an idea we've talked about every day on the podcast this week.
I know. You said you didn't want to talk about it anymore.
I did say when this episode started that finally I don't have to talk about race during an episode. I tend to focus a lot of my work on race relations. But one thing we've talked about every day on the podcast this week is that the Republican Party, conservatives in general, have sort of abandoned certain black communities, not in terms of policy, but in terms of messaging. And they're not willing to go into those communities with our messages of, hey, free markets are going to help you. If you gain more market skills, that's going to help you. If you take these handouts from the Democrats, that is going to lead to you having less market skills. That is going to lead to you being stuck in this position for the foreseeable future. So I hope that one thing that comes out of CPAC this year when they talk about race relations is that they talk about how we actually need to start having those relations. We actually need to start having those conversations with those people and listening to them instead of just telling them, oh, there's black on black crime, there's this and that. We can tell them, look, there are ways culturally, there are ways economically that we can help you. We have the solutions for your communities that are hurting. And that's just a message that we need to be sharing with them.
I couldn't agree more. I think on the broader scale, breaking down those racial barriers, breaking down gender barriers, all the barriers that the left uses to divide folks, you're absolutely right. Messaging is key for the Republican Party going forward and for the conservative movement going forward. I think we're starting to see over the last 2 decades, since our lifetime started, we have definitely seen some improvements. A lot of that has to do with alternative media. And so as we kind of close up today, a play for alternative media, if you want to keep up with this show, Western Journal, the Western Journal's podcast, WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. If you want to keep up with us, we're back here every weekday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. You can catch us at those times. You can catch our episodes if you're watching on YouTube, or if you are not, you can catch those episodes on rerun on YouTube. If you're going to be doing that, make sure you hit subscribe. Then make sure after you hit subscribe, you're going to want to go over and you're going to want to click that bell that popped up just a second ago. That bell is going to make sure that you're not getting throttled by those big tech overlords that we very briefly addressed in the last segment. You're going to be making sure that you are getting up-to-the-minute updates on when we go live. If you want more of those updates, if you want to catch us in other locations than YouTube, you can be catching us everywhere that you get your audio content. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, and wherever else you look at podcasts. I assure you we are there, and we will continue to be there. After we are live on YouTube, all of our content goes to those areas, and you can catch us on your phone on those. If you want to catch us when we go live, or if you want to catch those reports from CPAC that we're talking about, or any of the reports that we discuss on this show, you're going to want to go to westernjournal.com/newsletters, and you're going to want to sign up for all those newsletters. You're going to want to be getting us straight to your mailbox. You will be overriding that oppressive system by which they throttle our content and every other piece of conservative content on the market. It'll be going straight to your mailbox, and you will be getting it up to the minute. Again, all those updates up to the minute. And if you want to support the journalism we do here at the Western Journal, that last thing I'm going to ask of you is that you go to westernjournal.com/join. We have a broad array of subscription plans, multiple tiers. You'll be getting one of these excellent mugs here in that plan, and you will be getting an ad light program on our website. You'll be getting a lot less of those irritating ads that you see.
And more features to come.
Far more features to come.
Yeah.
We may be seeing some exclusive content from the features team at the Western Journal with that subscription plan. With that, we are out of time here at the Western Journal at WJ Live. And so if you want to catch us any of those platforms, we'll do. We'll see you next time.
Exposition, which is essentially a world fair, which
Time to go.
and she was also historic.
Oh, they got an audio version too.
And she was also historic for being the first kind of living trademark of the advertising